everybody, and welcome to a Gem of a Secret podcast. My name is Donatella My Secrets.
My name is Coco Holiday Gem Reverse.
How are you doing, Miss Buzzy McSlurson?
What?
Buzzy
McSlurson.
We are drinking a little bit of red wine tonight, which is very nice because Coco's drag daughter, Brittany provided us some Walking Dead Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah, the Walking Dead Cabernet Sauvignon. I just don't know how to pronounce it. I'm really not that tipsy, ladies and gentlemen.
My parents were winos, so I do.
So this week we've actually, our friend Paul from Grand Junction, Colorado has been visiting us.
Yeah, shout out to Paul.
Yeah, shout out to Paul. He came in last Friday, so after we filmed last week's episode, and so we've been doing all these cool, fun, gay things with him, and it's just kind of been great to like
as much
catch
as we
up.
can do during quarantine, with the state of the world.
Yeah.
We also have had to adjust because of that, but it's like we've still got to like show him some of the greatest things about living in the Pacific Northwest, which has been awesome.
Yeah, and actually this is funny. Somebody brought this up to me. A lot of my Grand Junction friends, they always say, they're like, oh, but Portland's like so crazy right now. You guys have like riots and the feds are here and whatever. And I do not want to downplay any of that. That is absolutely happening, and it's fucking fantastic that it is. But Portland is a very big place.
It is.
So it's not like I leave my house in riot gear to go to work. Like
there aren't like crazy there isn't crazy anarchy happening in our neighborhood right now. Like it's very peaceful and quiet where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Occasionally, especially when the protests were at their height, we could hear like helicopters flying.
Yeah.
Downtown, but that's really the extent of like what we've seen from it.
Yeah, and a lot of the protests are now circulating around neighborhood police stations, which is where they should be, because obviously we've beaten the Justice Center to a pulp at this point, and so now the protests are in like by police stations, and that's where they should be, like in neighborhood police stations, like trying to get this message of Black Lives Matter out there. And so we don't live close to a police station, so we don't hear anything.
No, we don't.
Like, and we haven't actually ran into any protests while we've been out and about. So I just want to like throw that out there for all of you who don't live here.
Yeah, it's not like the entire city is burning like Fox News tries to make it portrayed.
It does.
Kayleigh McEnany and Trump's press advisor being like, look what's happening in Portland. That dumb Tommy Lauren-esque, I just want to slap her every time I see her. She's like, actually, let me lie some more for the president. I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on a tangent if I keep going about Kayleigh McEnany. I think that's how you say her name. I don't even know. I don't know. Like her.
If you know how to pronounce it, put in the comments phonetically. So we can figure out how to say it. And I guess we could just watch something to learn, but...
Yeah, or not, because I don't care to learn her name, because I don't respect her.
I don't respect her as a person! Oh my goodness. So we are getting back into our 4-part miniseries, and I think we might actually, it's a 5-part, or maybe even a 6-part, because we're talking once again about queer representation in TV shows.
In television. Yeah, last episode we talked a lot about very queer-centric shows, and we also talked about the bury your gays trope in certain TV shows. This episode we're going to be focusing a little bit more on prominently straight television shows that had very strong supporting or lead gay characters in them, and also coming of age gay teen shows, which there's so many of.
Yeah, definitely. So what we mean by this about straight television shows that had gay moments, so I'm just going to go throw this one out there, because if you haven't seen this series, you really should, but we've all know about the Golden Girls.
Yes.
And Golden Girls, so like I've watched Golden Girls, I watched the entire series about 3 years ago. So obviously well into my I was 30. And like watching the series, and the series you have to remember when it came out in the 1980s or early 90s, had a lot of episodes about queer people, and just how they talked about it was just incredibly progressive at the time. Like seriously, they said stuff in those episodes that I say today.
Yeah.
And
Blanche's brother, that was the one that's
Blanche's brother.
Yeah, that's the one that probably sticks out the most. It was incredibly progressive, and also the Golden Girls is known as like a little gay slice of pop culture heaven just because of how those women interacted. I mean, they were all like older retired women in Florida that were kind of experiencing this like new like wave in their lives of living together, and it definitely had like a lot of not only just like gay characters that were referenced in there, but also just it's so iconic for gay culture.
Yeah, and so I actually really encourage people to go to YouTube, because you can actually listen to our podcast on YouTube as well. Go to YouTube and type in queer moments or gay moments from the Golden Girls. They have so many amazing moments that I think that people should listen to, because it was a really progressive show at the time for that stuff. And I wanted to start us out with that because it's probably one of the most popular shows on our list that people might not realize actually had those like awakening moments.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so there's a variety of different shows that have had queer characters in them, even though they have a predominantly straight cast of characters. We see that in shows like Roseanne, which was to follow after Golden Girls. We see it in crime shows like Law & Order SVU. We saw it later in the early 2000s with shows like Desperate Housewives and Grey's Anatomy. And these queer characters were really integral to a lot of the plot points. And some of them, as I said, were supporting. But it definitely brought the representation in these predominantly heterosexual-based shows where, there was a bit of like gay culture added to it. And it definitely helped with audiences who were not familiar with that sort of lifestyle.
Well, and you have to think about it. Like, I know that Roseanne herself is technically canceled at this moment, but Roseanne, from what is the most popular theory, had the first big lesbian kiss on a primetime TV show, and obviously it was a lesbian kiss, even though it happened with Roseanne and she's not a lesbian. But to be shown on a TV show like that is just a really huge ordeal, because Roseanne was built for, like, to be honest, for like the rednecks, conservatives, like, they lived
middle America,
like, it just, so like showcasing something like that for people who wouldn't normally be on board with it. You've all heard the story about, like, those conservative rednecks who like beat their gay kids until they're straight and whatever. So showing something like that and having it be okay on television was huge. Just huge.
And honestly, these shows aren't limited to just live action shows. There's shows like The Simpsons and King of the Hill that had really, really strong queer themes in certain episodes that it definitely helped bring that to a wider audience.
Like, even, like, for instance, like Family Guy. Like, so when Family Guy first started, obviously, like, Stewie, the youngest, is supposed to be like an evil mastermind, but now his character is borderline just kind of gay,
kind of queer.
Like, in most episodes there's something kind of related to that, just
like in his other series American Dad. Roger is like the queer alien character,
exactly. And so to try to, like, and they poke fun at those jokes and they try to normalize it, because Family Guy and The Simpsons and American Dad, like, those are some of the most popular cartoon shows like on television outside of like South Park. Like, so I mean, it's kind of...
You're a big Simpsons fan, right? You've watched...
I am a big Simpsons fan.
So explain some of your first, your first seeing any type of queer themes in The Simpsons, because I specifically remember Homer's phobia, that episode. I don't really know much about, like, the whole, like, Mr. Smithers and Mr. Burns storyline.
So, for instance, the whole thing about the Mr. Smithers storyline is obviously he's in love with Mr. Burns, but and they've been in the series since the beginning, of course. And they're recurring characters.
Recurring characters.
Integral recurring characters. So the thing about that is, when I was a kid, and this is going to sound kind of messed up, listeners, so just bear with me, because remember, I'm young. Simpsons has been on since, early 90s, very early 90s. And so me as a young kid thought that Mr. Smithers was actually, I don't know how I got to this, but was just being abused by Mr. Burns. Like, I thought that he was brainwashed. Like, because at a very young age, I understood that the meaner someone is to you, the more you can be in love with them, because, we always teach kids, like, oh, if they're bullying you, it's probably because they have a crush
sort of
on
projecting.
you. Yeah. So, because I was a shy kid and I was bullied a lot when I was in elementary school, and teachers not my mom, but like teachers would always say, "Oh, it's just because she likes you. It's just because she likes you." Because a lot of my bullies were girls. She's just because she likes you. So when I thought that Mr. Burns was being so mean to Mr. Smithers, and Mr. Smithers seemed infatuated with Mr. Burns, my kid brain actually thought it was just because that because of bullying. I thought that's what it was.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that Mr. Smithers could actually even possibly fathom having a connection with another man. And because as a kid, I didn't know that gay existed. I didn't. And we talked about it in one of the earlier series about Mrs. Doubtfire, of course, but cartoon shows that showed that. And just as a side note, this is why I really wish cartoon shows did have gay characters. And I'll talk about one a little bit later that was really mind-blowing for me. But when I was a kid, I didn't...
No, we didn't get that.
I didn't... It didn't exist. So much so it didn't exist. It actually didn't even seem possible.
There was a lot of subtext. I mean, you saw, like, him in Powerpuff Girls. Like, obviously a very queer character, but also a villain.
Actually, no, that actually fits in what I'm saying, though.
Yeah.
I didn't think that him was a cross-dresser or gay. I didn't. I just thought it was an eccentric character.
A very flamboyant character.
Yeah, very... Well, actually, even as a kid, I will still say an eccentric. I didn't realize... Like, I thought it was just evil. Like, just evil personified.
But that's the thing. Those are the type of tropes that, like...
That's true. That's true.
I mean, and we talked about that in the last episode, is, like, not only in TV and movies, but, like... villainy was often associated with being queer.
Oh yeah, because like you have the guy with like the long mustache, and you'd be like, Austin Powers,
and, like the cat. Yeah, exactly. It's like the villains are often associated with some level of queerness too.
I feel like my mind is like kind of getting blown because
I would even like argue that what's his name from Transformers, Megatron, kind of had like a gayness. Is it Megatron?
It is. Yes, I think it is.
I don't know.
I don't know. Comment in the comments if you like.
But anyway, I would say that even like the voice actors for a lot of those characters, it was a voice that was kind of associated with like that, like flamboyance. Like there was a certain level of flamboyance that was associated with villainy, even in those cartoons.
Yeah, it's actually, you're right. There apparently flamboyancy was seen as evil, and actually that makes sense because toxic masculinity dictated that, you know, the closer to femininity you got, the worse it was.
Yeah.
So maybe the epitome of evil was like him from the Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah.
A cross-dressing red alien.
Deviled
crab alien thing who had a very high voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah.
But we're going off on a tangent. So Simpsons, back to the Simpsons.
Back to the Simpsons.
My first introduction was because I was a big John Waters fan, which unfortunately we didn't talk about at all in our movies episodes. We should have talked about Divine and Pink Flamingos and all that, because that was also some big queer culture that took place back in like the 1970s with midnight movies and all that. But John Waters was a big guest on The Simpsons, and he was a gay character that Homer kind of had like a crisis with, because he was his friend, and he didn't know how to accept the fact that his friend was gay, and that was part of his main identity. And for me, it's really interesting to see how The Simpsons has evolved over the years, because just in the past few years, we had an episode that featured RuPaul. Raja Gemini, who was also a really big Simpsons fan, was a guest star on that episode, playing herself. So that's awesome. Like, yeah, there were drag queens featured on The Simpsons, and RuPaul was even on it. So it's like, it's crazy to see how the storyline of queer characters has evolved throughout the course of The Simpsons over the years, because there are so many years.
You know, it's funny because that's the same exact story with the King of the Hill one. The story we wrote down was Peggy's friend. Like, there's one episode where Peggy's friend is either a crossdresser or trans. It's not really identified in the show, but the person presents as masculine at one point to talk to Hank, and and saying like, oh yeah, Peggy seems really upset about something or whatever, and like, you know, it's really interesting because the person presenting as femme told Peggy, was like, oh yeah, you wear the same size shoes, because remember the big joke of King of the Hill is Peggy has big feet, and so the person thought that Peggy was also a crossdresser or trans or a drag queen because she had big feet. And so like like it hurt Peggy's feelings to like she's like, oh, people think that I'm a man and blah 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 blah, and like so the whole story is about Peggy's friend trying to teach her like, oh no, we're so empowered by you because you embody femininity,
a strength and
femininity, and like at the end of the episode it's like, let's all like, you know, exchange clothes, exchange shoes and whatever, and like give us tips and like tell us how to be more like you because you're so strong and you're a powerful woman, because not a woman doesn't have to fit into a certain mold. Like,
exactly.
It was such a powerful episode, and that episode I think was in the King of the Hill somewhat reboot. It wasn't when me and Donatella were kids. That episode was a lot later as well.
Yeah. I looked it up. It was Megatron, by the way.
Yeah.
Listeners.
Actually, it's funny because I was like, well, it's Optimus Prime. And I was like, I'm pretty sure it's Megatron.
Megatron. Yeah, I got it right. I doubted myself for a second. But I think, okay, so the cool thing about that, though, I think that has a lot to say about drag culture, too. Because a lot of people think that we are parodying femininity rather than building it up and having it be like a source of strength, when that's not really the case with drag.
No, it's not. And people think that... I heard from a cis gay way back in the day. Gosh, it's funny how, like, even 5 years ago, like, things are just so different when it comes to when I have these conversations. So cis gay, like, roughly 5 or 6 years ago was like, oh, I think drag is offensive because I feel like you're making fun of women. And, like, as a feminist, I, like, obviously take a lot of umbrage with that. And I was like, yeah, drag isn't making fun of women. Mm-hmm. I was like, the one thing I know how we're not making fun of women is because when you look at cis women who do drag, the stories they share are actually so much different than the stories we share.
Definitely.
Like, for instance, like Geneva Convention, for instance, who's a hyper queen, did a drag performance about like breastfeeding and did one about like pubic hair and like all this stuff and like stuff that cis men, I feel, or even like mass presenting people who do drag as women, like would not actually tell those stories because those stories don't necessarily occur to us at that level.
That's true.
Like, and in drag, I never do a story about being pregnant.
No.
Like, so stuff like that. And while I'm on my tangent, I forgot to ask Donna, how are you doing this evening?
Oh, I'll let you know after this brief commercial break, Coco.
Have you ever been drunk off your ass at a gay bar during a drag show and thought,
you know what, I can do that.
That's too hard.
Maybe if I control the jello shots, I can have more for myself.
then have we got a show for you. Cooking Up a Queen, a brand new limited series brought to you by the CD Studios. Over the course of a 10-week run, you'll be brought into the flagrant and fanciful world of queer nightlife with Camp Wanakiki finalist Coco Jim Holiday and rising star of the Portland drag scene, Touche Douche. These two will delve deep into what it takes to be a drag entertainer, the do's and don'ts of newcomers on the scene, as well as discuss topics that you would never think would come up until you're a cross-dresser on the corner of 5th and Broadway. Trust me, you're going to want to pay special attention for that one because, it's a lot. Make sure to tune in starting May 31st every Sunday for Cooking Up a Queen, available wherever you podcast.
It's a podcast with Coco and Donatella podcast. Tune into what they tell you podcast with Coco and Donatella podcast.
Coco, I am toasty, and I'm this Walking Dead Cabernet Sauvignon is gonna have me being the Walking Dead in the morning. Luckily, we only had one bottle, so I can avoid a hangover. But, yeah, I'm feeling great.
So we're talking about straight television that had gay moments, and we're also going to be talking about coming-of-age gay teen portrayals. But
Yes.
on the hook of cartoon shows, I wanted to talk about The Hollow. The Hollow is one of those... So I'm just really into any TV show where kids are trapped in a video game. So like Ready Player One or something like that.
I loved that movie.
I love stuff like that. Like Sword Art Online is another one of my favorite anime series. But
so good.
So good. So The Hollow is pretty much the same thing. Kids trapped in a video game. Sorry, I ruined season 1 for you. But anyway, like, so it comes out the very first episode of season 2. There's this awkward moment between the three main characters because one of the characters kissed one of the other characters. And they're like, why is it awkward or whatever? Because this is now they're back in the real world. Mm-hmm. And the guy looks at him and goes, I'm gay. Like, so when the girl kissed him, obviously he didn't really feel anything. Mm-hmm. And it was because of that specific fact. And in the whole first season, they never said that he was gay, obviously, because they lost their memories. And that was just... I would have... Basically, I would have killed for a TV show.
When did that take place, the show?
Last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so... Yeah, it either came out... No, it came out last year. The Hollow Season 2 came out last year. And, like, just having that moment... And it was, like, such a huge article. Because he had, like, gay pride flags in his room and whatever in this scene. And a gay cartoon show that was pretty solid. And because his gayness was never really a full part of his character. Yeah. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is because, like, I would have killed for that as a kid.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Before we go on to the coming-of-age gay teen shows, because we do have a lot of ground to cover there, I do want to talk a little bit about Law & Order SVU and the representation of trans women, actresses, and characters on that show. It very much so, unfortunately, does mimic real life in the fact that a lot of these special victims are trans women of color who are murdered while they are partaking in sex work. And you'll find a lot of trans representation on these shows because it does mimic what happens in real life. And I think that that's really important for us to point out.
Yeah, and the thing is, Law & Order, because Law & Order's been on for almost 18 or 19 years, has never shied away from the queer stories or the trans stories.
No.
And I've really appreciated that because this was our way into that world. They never shied away from talking about sex work, and they actually kind of spun sex work in a positive manner. Because obviously sometimes they would work with some of the sex workers to, like, you know, find the criminals or whatever. Yeah. Like, is anyone bothering the girls or whatever? You know, stuff like that. And actually in the second to last season, actually this last season, there was a trans character who was a sex worker who got abused or whatever, and they actually brought them back for the season finale of the next season because of, like, you know, the perpetrator and whatever, like, and it was just a really interesting story and dynamic, because basically it was like my parents didn't accept me for being trans, and the character just bought them off with, like, nice expensive things, and so they took it, and, like, I always land on my feet, because, like, that story and that of I am trans and my parents didn't accept me is such a common story.
It is. And I feel like with any show, they've definitely had a learning curve of how to deal with things better over time. So just like what you're saying with the recent seasons, it's like getting those characters more involved, and also, like, telling the true story of what happens when cases like this happen in the real world, because they happen every single day, and they're not going away. This is basically our way of saying trans lives matter. Black trans lives matter. Indigenous trans lives matter. Yeah.
All trans lives need to matter more to each of you, like, for all of our listeners out there, because they're being murdered at a disproportionate rate. Trigger warning. Like, so just be on the lookout for that, because it really is a huge subject and topic. That's why kind of Grey's Anatomy in the current seasons, there's actually a trans male character who kicks ass. This character is just super great, and that's in the Shondaland. And I know that Shondaland used to be a big thing like 4 or 5 years ago, because, you know, they had How to Get Away with Murder, Grey's Anatomy, Scandal was part of Shonda Rhimes land, and now Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder have ended, and Grey's Anatomy is, of course, still on. So Grey's Anatomy is like this flagship of, like, telling these queer stories, telling these trans stories in a way that's just, like, so effing real. And so just pay attention to that, folks.
Definitely. So now we're going to move on to our coming-of-age gay stories, our gay teen portrayals. And this is something that there's quite a lot of shows, actually, that kind of brought this up. Degrassi was probably the first Canadian television show, but something that I feel like a lot of American teens still tuned into. Me and my sister were obsessed with Degrassi.
I was obsessed with Degrassi.
I was so obsessed with it. And the queer storylines, like, it was something that nothing that any American show was putting out there.
Yeah, so it's funny because, I mean, I love Degrassi because it gave us Drake. No, I'm just joking. But the thing about Degrassi that I loved, I watched Degrassi Next Generation. When I first started watching it when I was very young, it was Degrassi Next Generation. And I know that there were literally 2 or 3 Degrassi's that existed before
It
that.
started with them in junior high.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
very, very young.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
young. And then, so when I was watching Degrassi Next Generations, literally one of the kids from the first season was, a mom.
Yeah.
Like, Emma's mom in Degrassi Next Generation. Anyway, so, my first gay character in Degrassi was Marco.
Marco, yes, Marco.
Yeah. And Marco got screwed. The funny thing is, the thing is, so if you kept watching Degrassi Next Generation, they actually talked about HIV. When Marco was going to college.
Also, Paige was dating a guy who was HIV positive at one point, too.
Really?
Yes,
I
I
don't remember
believe so. Yeah.
Paige Michael Chuck. I just think that name is just so
Paige
great.
was my favorite.
And I love
Okay,
how
hon.
I love how Paige but she either was bisexual or lesbian because she dated a girl for a very long time.
Yeah.
In the series later on, and I loved being able to witness those stories. And I remember when Marco came out as gay, because it was during a play. I think he came out to his dad. I think it was Romeo and Juliet, of course. And so he just went out to the audience and looked at him, and he's like, Dad, I'm gay.
Yeah.
In front of the whole auditorium. And that just shook me to my core because I wasn't out of the closet yet. And I was just to be that brave.
Yeah. Yeah, Degrassi also broke some ground by having trans characters as well. There was Adam Torres. And if we want to go along with I guess in this case it would be a bury your queers trope because Adam was one of the prominent characters later in the Next Generation series that ended up dying from a texting and driving accident, but he was I think first openly trans character
on that show.
To be
I
on.
just think it's so disgusting how they can't let these characters live and thrive necessarily.
Yeah.
Even I think Marco's story ended with his partner cheating. He walked in on his partner sleeping with somebody else.
Yeah.
So Marco's been this gay character for this series for a long time. And so my thing is it's okay, seriously, anybody listening out there, it's okay to let queer people be happy and have positive relationships. It just seems like it's such in my opinion at this point, being a queer person, it's such an easy trope to kill off your trans characters, and it's such an easy trope to have your queer relationships just falter and fall to pieces.
It is. Yeah. And another really good coming of age series that I'm not sure if it was Canadian or not, but it was specifically about lesbian relationships was and I got obsessed with it just probably in the same way that you got obsessed with the L Word. Was South of Nowhere.
Oh, I never watched it.
Oh my god, it was so good. So I don't remember the character's name exactly, but I was watching it as I was going through college and coming out with my experience with my family, and one of the characters basically experienced the same type of backlash that I got for coming out. And the parallels with me and her story, I believe South of Nowhere had about somewhere between 3 to 5 seasons, but it was so good. And I definitely recommend checking it out. It's one of those early 2000 queer gems that you need to check out for sure, because not only is the soundtrack and the storyline just absolutely perfect, but it tells so much about the struggles of being a coming of age queer person, and it does it from a lesbian standpoint. And I think that that's a very important story to tell as well, because often we hear a lot about these gay storylines in television, and often there's needs to be more representation when it comes to women and their experiences as
I think
queer
so
people.
too, and I don't. And this is going to sound a little bit problematic, especially since I am bisexual. But the fact is, I also want lesbian stories.
Yeah.
The reason I like the L Word so much is it wasn't I'm just, I'm taking a break from men for 5 minutes. Because that story is problematic. I like queer lesbian stories that, it's not like they're, taking a break from men. That's because that story still surrounds, that literally feeds into the patriarchy.
It does.
It
Yeah.
does. And so having lesbian stories like South of Nowhere and the L Word and L Word Generation Q is important because it's not about men.
Yeah, and then I think the thing that separates South of Nowhere from a lot of these other series that we're talking about, because granted Degrassi did have its fair share of lesbian characters, but it was also, Degrassi was kind of all-encompassing. It was talking about teen youth struggles regardless of what your identity was. South of Nowhere focuses so much on the lesbian identity, and that's something that really I think was important to portray. I want to backtrack a little bit just because I want to talk about this just for 1 second. But another barrier gaze trope that I noticed in a predominantly straight show, but also had coming of age gay characters in it, was United States of Terra.
So good.
Oh my god, it was so good. Yes, yes. Toni Collette was Tara, who's
So
the mom.
good.
Oh, and she's amazing. Toni Collette.
She's such a great actress.
She's amazing. Like
Yes.
Hereditary, anything she's ever in.
Hereditary is so good.
Little Miss Sunshine, she's the mom in that too.
Oh, that's
But
good too.
yes, so the first gay love interest that the son has in this show ends up dying in an accident where he's hit by a train. And that was also just like, I remember specifically a very prominent coming of age gay storyline back in the early 2000s that ended again in death. He eventually does, have other love interests throughout the
Right.
show, but the very first gay love interest after coming out ended up dying. And it's just something that we see that's
Like
really
straight,
common.
like I know not everyone in Hollywood is straight. My gosh.
Yeah.
Like it drives me crazy.
It's like, why can't these kids be happy?
For five, like they have to have massive death. Like
Yeah.
that's, like not all of us have to deal with that. I'm sorry. Like
Yeah.
we can deal with breakups too. That's also something you could write for us. Jeez.
Exactly.
God. United States of Terror, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know, it's an amazing series. I fully recommend the whole show.
It's so good.
Oh, it's phenomenal.
It was like a Starz original series or Showtime, one of those like channels. But yeah, Toni Collette, you can't go wrong with her.
Yeah. So the next one I want to talk about, obviously, is Glee.
We can't not talk about Glee.
Glee is kind of everything for, like, so I was older when Glee came out, but
Same.
I think that Glee, actually, I know how younger people feel about Glee because I saw a lot of videos. Like, so I watched the Glee concert tour, which they have video snippets of people talking about the characters in the show.
Yes.
Especially like the lesbian relationships in that show.
Santana and Brittany.
Santana and Brittany, which it did kind of suck that Brittany's lesbianism / bisexuality was kind of just glossed over. Like Santana was the one who went through the lesbian storyline.
Yeah,
and Brittany was just
a
like,
little more fluid. I
she's
love
like,
you.
nah, you know,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's fine. Bisexuality exists because I live.
Yeah.
But they did have that, and then obviously Kirk for being the gay character, Kirk and Blaine, and then the football player, obviously, who I can't remember from the first
what was
season.
his name? Oh
I
yeah,
do
he was the bully though because
He was the bully.
he was hiding his sexuality. But yeah, I feel like the healthiest probably queer relationship portrayed in that was Santana and Brittany though. I feel like overall it went through, like, I think it was very important because it also, with Santana, talked about intersectionality and what it is like to grow up Latina in a very oppressive religious family with her grandmother.
Right.
Her mom was played by Gloria Estefan and was very accepting of her, but her grandmother was not.
Right.
And the grandmother actually had that storyline was very, very deep, and there was even a the moment that I remember the most, because it's exactly how I felt when my Pentecostal grandmother told me I was an abomination, and I realized I was never going to change her mind. Basically, Brittany invites the grandmother to their wedding and is like, I've been the lady, like, she had been taking care of her grandmother in like a different setting and like kind of meeting with her, and she was like, I'm the one that's marrying your granddaughter. She's like, you lied to me, like, was very offended, and she's like, well, I did this because I wanted to try to get close to you, and I know how important it is that you're at our wedding for Santana. But she's like, honestly, when it comes down to it, what we're waiting for is for old people like you to die. She's like, generational turnover is very important because our generation understands that we can live happy and live and be free with who we are. And once you're gone, we don't have to worry about that anymore. So you can either accept it and be a part of our lives, or you can go.
It's true.
Or you could die bitter, I mean, and
It's-
it's the harsh reality, but it's like, it is a generational thing. And
It
I think
is.
Glee was part of bringing that, Ryan Murphy, regardless of what you want to say about how terrible he has treated certain characters in specific series and how not progressive he has been, he also brought some iconic storylines and dialogue and conversations.
Well, and that's why even with the Kirk storyline, the Kirk and Blaine storyline, because, like, just, if you haven't watched Glee by now, I'm sorry, but I'm going to trigger warning, not trigger warning, just a spoiler warning.
Spoiler alert is in effect.
Spoiler alert. So, like, later in the series, you actually do find out that Blaine cheats on Kirk.
Yeah.
And with just some no-name guy is pretty much what it is. And, so it takes forever for them to get back together, like a very long time. And they eventually do get back together by the end of the series, and they actually end up growing old together. And then, it's great how they did that story, because it was like a high school love scenario, because it's one of the first few stories to where gay characters ended up together without like too much of an emotional roller coaster. Like, it just, because honestly, like, Glee was such a monumental show for us that I remember certain people in my Facebook were saying, like, they're like, God, Glee is just going to force you to like gay people. And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Because they put those characters at the forefront.
And they had those hard conversations, like
Yeah.
the one that I was talking about. And also just same with you, like it like what you were talking about, the fact that there's infidelity too sometimes in these relationships, and forgiving that person, and what it means to like talk through those types of incidents, what it means to have like trans representation, not only through the form of like Coach Beast, but also Alex Newell's character in Glee as well. You know,
definitely.
So it's like Glee gave you all of the queer representation, coming of age queer representation that you wanted and needed, and it tackled a lot of very difficult subjects, sometimes not in the best way, sometimes in a really great way, but overall it brought these conversations and discussions to, in a lot of ways, middle America, because people were obsessed with it. You know, it was a fun musical show, and then we talked about last episode Pose, which is another one of Ryan Murphy's series, and you see the differences in the representation in Glee to Pose, and it's just
like
nice.
a learning curve. It
really is.
But just as a side note, I do want to obviously have a quick REP because of Naya Rivera, who played Santana, actually recently passed away. From what the story shows, like saving her son in a boating accident where she drowned. And she was very young, and that's incredibly sad because she was such a powerful character on Glee. And sorry if I mispronounced her name.
It's Naya Rivera. You got it.
Yeah, because I read a lot of articles, and I actually did. I was one of the few people that when we found out that, you know, she was missing and her son was found in the boat, I was one of those people holding on to hope that, you know,
she would be
fine. Like maybe she just got lost in the woods or couldn't get back to shore, and they were just going to find her or whatever. But obviously, they eventually found her body, and it's a really tragic and sad story.
It really is, and I owe a lot of my own personal identity to this show, not only through Santana and Brittany's storyline, but through Kurt and Blaine's as well. And it shaped me into the confident gay man that I am today. So I you know, or gay person that I am today, queer person that I am today, because that's not exactly how I identify. But that show definitely shaped me in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So the last one that I want to talk about is Ugly Betty.
Yes.
And now it had a prominent gay character who was recurring, which was Mark, who worked with Ugly Betty. And then obviously the son, her nephew, was also very queer, looked very queer, actually presented very queer, like stereotypically. And what's interesting about that is, I was telling Donatella before we recorded this, it actually had one of the most powerful moments about coming out, because this is our coming out section, that I've ever seen in a queer TV show. So I don't remember quite what led up to this moment, but like Betty and obviously her sister, and her dad or whatever, just like they wanted to have this moment where they were like having a coming out party for the son, and I remember the gay character Mark showed up and was like, oh no, we can't do this and whatever. And then like obviously the son shows up and he looks at his mom and he's like, I'm not gay.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't out yet. Like, you can't celebrate having a coming out party for somebody and they're not out yet.
And when they haven't told you themselves.
Yeah, and he's like, and Mark looked at him, he's like, so he's not gay.
Yeah.
And I just love that moment, because every single one of our listeners out there, it doesn't matter how much you knew that someone was queer, something that's incredibly damaging is not letting somebody get to that place themselves. If they open up to you, I will tell you one thing right now, that's something that will shut them down completely unless they're fully out. If somebody is exploring their sexuality with you, saying that like, oh, I already knew, that'll shut them down and is really damaging. If somebody has already decided that they're queer and they are letting you know and you saying that, it's not as damaging. Not the best thing to say, but just be aware of that.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the story is, this is someone's journey and it will change their life forever, because we're currently not still in the safest world for queer people. So just be respectful of that journey, because the fact of the matter is, it's a hard conversation to have. So just listen to what somebody has to say, and that's why that moment is beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's so important that we let people's stories be their own, and that people come out on their own terms specifically, because we know how difficult it is to be outed, and to also just to like kind of have your narrative taken over by people who think they know more about you than you do.
Exactly. So like how we started this entire series, like when we talked about Love, Simon, there is a moment in that movie he was like, because he was always pretty out to a degree. And when he got outed to his whole school, the guy was like, but you were already like kind of out. And he basically said, you took that moment away from me.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that is some tea.
True.
Some true tea.
Yeah. Well, everybody, that concludes our series on gay television, queer television, and queer movies. I believe we may do one other series just on other queer media, which will include web series, web comics, that type of stuff. Print media, different things that we've kind of found that are outside of the TV and movie realm. But thank you so much for tuning in for these 4 parts that we've done.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. It's been really great to unpack my trauma with you.
Yeah, same.
And to all of you out there listening who might still be in the closet, or are a parent of somebody who is struggling to come out of the closet, like, we hear you, we see you, and all of your fears are valid. Don't come out come out when you want to, is what I mean to say. Like, recognize that, you know, these queer stories helped me get to where I am, and, you know, whatever stories help you. So yeah, please, listeners, comment on wherever you listen to podcasts, like if it's on our website or on YouTube or any of the other channels. Like, talk about some of the queer stories and TVs and movies that, you know, affected your life and whatever. And maybe we'll have a couple shout outs in our next episode saying, you know, like, somebody talked about this one and it changed their life or something.
Yeah, definitely. We would love that interaction. Thank you again for listening to A Gem of a Secret podcast. My name is Donatella My Secrets.
My name is Coco, now correctly Gem Holiday.
And you can find me at Donatella_My Secrets on Instagram.
And I'm at COCOJEM Holiday on Instagram.
All right, we'll catch you next week, listeners. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This has been another episode of A Gem of a Secret podcast. The hosts of A Gem of a Secret podcast are Donatella My Secrets and Coco Gem Holiday. You may follow Donatella My Secrets at Donatella_My Secrets on Instagram. You may follow Coco Gem Holiday at Coco Gem Holiday on Instagram. Original music by Touche Douche and Party Favors. You can follow them respectively at The Touche Douche and at Party Favors Music on Instagram. For more exclusive content, visit www.agemofasecretpodcast.com. That is AJEM of a secret podcast.com. Be sure to tune in every week on Thursday for a new episode wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have any comments or questions, email us at agemofasecretpod@gmail.com. Please don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.